Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legend of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are going to do a little challenge. We are going to try and fix the regional balance levels of every region, but we're only allowed to make one balance change. So this I thought was quite interesting because it gets you thinking a lot about like what cards are really kind of crucial to each region, and if you change them, will this break something or not? What changes need to happen to try and achieve kind of a solid regional balance. And so we're going to deal with three rules today. One is that I can only make one change to one card in each region. Dual region cards count as, either region I can put them in. Number two, each change that I make must be a realistic balance change. Nothing crazy, no major reworks, anything like that. Just pretty simple, small balance changes that you are likely to see. And number three, the final goal of this is to achieve perfect regional balance, to get all the regions feeling at about the same power level. It's going to be quite tricky, but hopefully we can do it. So let's dive in with our first region, and that is Bandle City, and I'm sure, as many of you understand, Bandle City is probably the best region in the game. In fact, not probably, almost definitely the best region in the game, and I would say by quite a fair margin as well. So only making one change is going to be quite tough, because really I would like to make multiple changes, to help bring Bandle City down to the level that perhaps the other regions are. So this is gonna, so this was a tough choice. There are some obvious candidates here, Poppy, I mean, even things like Octopus, even things like Conchologist, Loping Telescope, Pokey Stick, like, Mare, of course, and then, like, even Lecturing Yordle would be a good choice as well. Maybe you want to go Minimorph, even Shellfolk. There's plenty of options here that I'm sure everyone would probably be, like, yeah, that would probably be a fine change if I picked that card. But I have gone for one of those cards, and it is Bandle City Mare. And the reason that I went for Mare over everything else is basically because I think that this is the one that perhaps is having, like, the biggest strength impact overall on the region as a whole. And the reason for that is because Mare is obviously just such a good card that allows you to just go so wide, so fast, and in combination with things like Poppy and the like, is just, oppressive almost. And so what I would do, very simple, is just make Bandle City Mare a 2-1. Of course, there are a lot of things that deal 1 damage now in the game, so the hope is, with that change, the Bandle City Mare, you can remove him straight away, and you don't need to worry about the discount effect that much, because there's plenty of different options, whether it be Make It Rain, or Pokey Stick, or Twisted Fate, or whatever, just plenty of options to deal that 1 damage to the Mare. He should die pretty reliably now to a lot of different things that hopefully would be enough to, put an end to the reign of this old man's dominance. But Bandle City was very much the easy choice, because that was by far the best region, and now we start getting into tougher territory with Bilgewater, because is Bilgewater good or bad? Is it below or above average? The answer is, I don't know. It's kind of really tough, because there are certain things within Bilgewater that are really quite strong, like Misfortune. Gangplank is pretty good. We've seen Lurk, obviously, with Pike come about more recently, being pretty good. Obviously, we just got the Nami nerf. I don't think we're going to touch anything like that. Fizz has never really quite been great. Twisted Fate is still okay. Tom Kench, not great, and Nautilus, not great. So, do I look to nerf some of these cards? Like Crackshot Corsair could be the kind of thing that I nerf. And, I was kind of tossing it up, as I was for some other regions as well. But I think, in the end, what I mostly leaned on in these situations where it's like, I don't know whether to nerf or buff something, I went with a buff. And this time I targeted Deep and Nautilus, and what I wanted to do was give them a power card, give Deep in particular a really strong card. And so what I did, in my mind, I think this would be a good change, is make the Slaughter Ducks 2 mana. Obviously the Slaughter Ducks come down and it doesn't do anything, it just sits there. Right, it just sits there for a while, but it will, just start tossing very slowly and sort of gets you started on the toss path going down that alley. Now, the reason that this being 2 mana would be very good for Deep is because, obviously, it doesn't affect the board. This card does nothing affecting the board, and for a 3 mana card to not affect the board in today's day and age is not great. But I think if we made this 2 mana instead, you could then get away with that. You know, this is going to be a pretty powerful card for you coming down. On turn 2, it's going to get your tossing started nice and early. It's going to help you get deep pretty early. And, you know, then it's going to summon something itself. I think that this is the kind of thing that would help deep, you know, sort of come back in a big way if they got another sort of power card. But as I said, I didn't want to lift up too much else. So I wanted to pick a card that was like very focused on deep. You know, I didn't want to like buff, you know, like Joel Hunters or something, right? Like if I buff this card, you know, this is a card that could go in a bunch of decks and be very successful there. I wanted to pick something that was like specific to deep, only really can be played in deep, because I didn't want to buff up, you know, too much else. And I think that this would be a pretty good option to do that and to help deep in a big way. Moving on to Demacia, and well, Demacia obviously recently did get some pretty big buffs in the case of Lux, and also a buff to Quinn as well. Obviously, we saw a big Dragons buff as well, so Shyvana you could even include in that, and we've even seen Jarvan get some play. But I'm going to use this opportunity again. Basically, in my mind, Bandle City is way above everything else, and so, as I said, dual region cards I can put in either region, and so Poppy is coming down as the Demacia nerf. It doesn't have that much to do with Demacia itself, but I need to take this opportunity to bring Bandle City down further if I can, and according to my rules, I can. So Poppy, I am making a 3-3. To me, it's the only change that really makes sense. You know, you can't really mess with the leveled up or the level up condition either, because they don't really matter most of the time. So really, it comes down to how you changing, you know, this card here, you know, without making it terrible. And I think if you made it a 4-2, it really would be quite bad. Poppy would be quite bad, and I think, you know, if you went like weird with it and did something else to change the text or the mana cost or anything like that, then it would just feel clunky. 4 is the right mana cost for this kind of effect, but I think it just needs to be a 3-3, and you know, it would influence your deck building. You know, all of a sudden you wouldn't be playing 3 mana cards with 4 attack if you're in a Poppy deck. And that's like a slight deck building cost of Poppy, but I still think she'd work perfectly fine. She'd still become a 4-4 on attack, so still potentially pretty difficult to remove. And, you know, yeah, I think that's just a way to correctly balance Poppy in my mind. So now we move on to Freljord, potentially the weakest region of all. Obviously, for some of these regions, we are expecting, you know, champion or even 2 champions to come out and kind of, you know, help solidify them as a good region again. So you want to be a bit careful with that, but you know, obviously I don't know what they're going to do. So when it comes to Freljord, I kind of thought, let's forego the champions for a second. Let's give Freljord itself a power card. And there was 3 options that I was really thinking about. One was Icevale Archer. You know, making this like a 3-2 instead. You know, just to be in line with kind of Brightsteel Protector. You know, this is a card that could go in a lot of decks, and I really did think long and hard about Icevale Archer. Second choice was Kindly Tavern Keeper, a card that I thought, you know, could really benefit a lot of different Freljord decks, could help, you know, slow the game down if this was a power card in general, and, you know, would be pretty nice. And the final option was Wording Stones, you know, making this a 0-4 potentially, you know, having this be very difficult to remove, allowing ramp decks to exist very well. I kind of sided against that because obviously we did just get the buff to the faces of the old ones. And so I did go for Kindly Tavern Keeper. Sorry, not Kindly Cavern Keeper. So Kindly Tavern Keeper, I want to make a 3 mana 3-4. I want to give Freljord a big, powerful 3-drop card that, you know, they said long ago that healing was meant to be part of Freljord's identity. And at the time, I think there was only 2 cards that actually had heal on them in Freljord, and one of them was Kindly Tavern Keeper, which apparently I can't say. But I think that this card could become a very powerful card that could enable a lot of different strategies. It could enable a lot of different things within Freljord straight away. It would help slow the game down as well. You know, just it would be a big counter and a good counter to things like, you know, burn aggro or anything like that. This would be a very strong card if it was a 3 mana 3-4. It would be a very solid body. And the fact that it can also heal your Nexus, but also it can heal an ally as well. So it would work with things, you know, maybe in a Braum deck or something like that as well. So there are multiple applications for this kind of card if Kindly Tavern Keeper, you know, was to become a very powerful card. And I think that 3 drops are super, super important in this game. They are like, I think the most important mana cost is 3 in this game for any unit. And I think each region, as we've seen with Demacia, you know, in the Vanguard Sergeant, it's kind of taken that I'm the Demacia 3-drop, I'm a very strong card, and it has improved Demacia a lot. I think the same could be done with Freljord, giving them a very solid 3-drop that, you know, kind of does a lot of what the region wants to do, can synergize with a lot of different things within the region. I think would be very good for the game, and so kindly Tavern Keeper, become a 3/4. On to Ionia, a very difficult one, because when it comes to Ionia, you have to be very careful with what you bounce, because we've seen Aurelia kind of break the game. We've seen Zed kind of break the game. Shen has been tier 1 for a very long time, not so much now. I wouldn't say break the game, though. Shen, you're fine. Karma has broke the game before, and Lee Sin has broke the game before. So, you know, when you're looking at 7 champions, and 4 of them have been, you know, pretty toxic at one point or another, you know, you have to be somewhat careful. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to look at any of the champions. I'm instead going to look at the followers. But you still have to be really careful here too, because, you know, there are a lot of things. Ionia is always on a knife edge. I don't know why, but they just decided that Ionia was basically going to be the region where anytime Ionia is good, the game is bad. It is basically how this game has worked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a popular card with a lot of people, and that is Dancing Droplet, and I'm going to give it back a tune, but I'm going to take away Elusive. The reason I'm going to take away Elusive is because it doesn't need Elusive. We need less Elusive in the game, in my opinion. But there's nothing wrong with this having a tune, and I think this would be a better card if it had a tune, and would then go into decks that aren't Elusive decks. You know, it can still enable a lot of different strategies with just having a tune on it. When it has a tune, it can enable a lot of things. You know, you can see it in Yasuo decks, Karma decks. You could see it in aggressive decks still, you know, as a kind of interesting draw tool. You know, even things like Aurelia decks, all of those, it will still go in. Probably even Lee Sin decks as well, if we're being real. So it's still synergizing with 4 of the champions. I mean, maybe even Lulu decks. I don't know. You know, definitely, though, 4 of the champions would play this card if it had a tune. But if it has Elusive and a tune, then you're basically only going to see it in aggressive decks. And that is where I think the problem stems. And so what I want to do is, you know, just give it a tune, allow it to be played in a ton of variety decks within Ionia, have it be a pretty powerful card, and synergize very well with the region as a whole, and just be, you know, a nice card. But it doesn't have Elusive, so, you know, good. On to Noxus, and this was the region that I perhaps, you know, debated the most in my head, because we look at the champions, obviously, Fulgo, Katarina. We got the nerfed Draven, who's still, you know, decent. We got LeBlanc, Riven, who again I'd both say are decent. Swain, decent. Vladimir maybe even decent. Darius, I know a lot of people meme about Darius, but I still think Darius, even though it's a very simple design, is actually perfectly okay. And Sion obviously is probably a bit too good. So it's kind of like, do I buff something? Do I nerf something? What on earth would I buff? Because it feels like, again, Noxus is a bit on a knife edge itself. You know, I kind of went through the cards and I was like, oh, what on earth would I buff here that, like, you know, I wouldn't be worried about something. And that is kind of what it came down to, is that I kind of went through the cards and I was a bit like, I'm kind of worried. Like, if I change, you know, the wrong card here, like, I want to make a change that's meaningful, but I don't want to change something to make it too bad. And so what I eventually decided was, I went against myself, because I was kind of going in, whenever it's a coin flip, you know, go with the buff. I actually went against it here, because I couldn't find a buff that I really liked. And so I'm actually going to nerf Sion. Now, this will still be a popular pick, I'm sure, amongst many people. The reason I think this is okay is I do think that Noxus still has the tools to survive. I still think Draven is pretty good. I still think LeBlanc and Riven are pretty good. I still think Swain is pretty good. You know, and I do think there is space somewhere for Vladimir and Darius. Maybe other buffs would be needed to help them out. But I thought there was enough in Noxus. You know, there's still the aggro package within Noxus. That's not going anywhere. So I still thought there's enough Noxus stuff it'll be fine. You know, and so I am going to nerf Sion. I am going to change the level up to make it be harder. I don't know what the right number is. You know, I haven't played enough Sion, as you can see by the level 1. I haven't played enough Sion to be like, you know, oh, the number needs to be this. You know, is it 40? Is it 45? Is it somewhere in between the two? I have no idea. Someone will know in the comments, I'm sure. And, you know, whatever that number is, I would change it to that number. Whatever the right number is for this level up, so that it, you know, becomes a bit of a challenge. That is what I want. Moving on to Piltover and Zorn, and what I wanted to do with this region, pretty clear. This region, I think, needs a buff. It has some powerful cards like Thermo Beam and Mystic Shot, and, you know, there are powerful tools within this region, but it definitely needs something else. And so what I thought I would do is change a champion this time. A champion that has not really seen much in the way of play very recently, and that is Heimerdinger. I've said this change before, so I'll just quickly go through it. And that is change the Apex Turret to have Lifesteal, and change the T-Hex to have Fierce. This way, you know, Heimer, I think, could very easily synergize with this. Get the turrets out, have it have Lifesteal. Don't know why it doesn't, I'll be honest. You know, I mean, I honestly don't know. It's not like Piltover and Zorn has access, you know, some of these other keywords. You know, is there any Piltover and Zorn challenger? I don't think so. You know, so it's not like these things are normal anyway, so I don't see why Lifesteal couldn't be a part of it. And I think that having Lifesteal, having a Lifesteal turret, would allow Heimer to thrive. It would give Heimer a way of playing the game. It would give you a very clear direction to go in with Heimer. And I think it would be very good for the game as a whole. It would make Heimer a big threat again all of a sudden. And I think that it just makes a lot of sense, and I think it would benefit the region as a whole as well, because I feel like Heimer is the most Piltover and Zorn of the champions. You know, he's very spell focused, very small champion himself. He creates small units as well. So I thought he was the most, you know, Piltover and Zorn champion, so therefore changing him to be you know, a good champion again would help the region pretty much as a whole. Moving on to the Shadow Isles, and this one, again, Shadow Isles is for the first time kind of suffering. Now, there really isn't much great to do within Shadow Isles, and I had a lot of different options to buff here. You know, Elise, Callista, Nocturne. You know, obviously I've already buffed Deep, so maybe not Maokai, but, you know, Kindred, of course. I mean, probably not Thresh, but maybe Hecarim. You know, plenty of things that you could buff within Shadow Isles in terms of the synergies. And so what I went for again is giving them a power card. You know, trying to help the region as a whole, trying to help everyone rather than just one archetype, because I think the region needs it. And so what I'm going to do, and this will be an interesting one to see how people react, I'm going to revert Curse Keeper to a 4-3. Now I'm going to make the Escaped Abomination a 4-3 again. This card synergizes with so much within Shadow Isles. It enables, you know, both aggro and mid-range packages within the region. And I think that for that reason, this is a card that should be good. You know, without this card being good, the region as a whole has struggled. And so I think it's probably a good thing, you know, similar to a Make It Rain that we saw before. Make this card good because it enables a lot. It enables the region, basically. I think that this is one of the key cards within the region. I think between this, Glimpse Beyond, and Val Feast, I think they all need to be pretty solid cards to enable the 3 different types of play within Shadow Isles. And I think that I would go back. You know, I wouldn't make it a 4-4. I wouldn't go crazy, but I'd make it a 4-3 again. Moving on to Shurima, and Shurima's an interesting one because Shurima right now I feel like has a lot of good things, but maybe not crazy good things, maybe with the exception of Sivir still. You know, Sivir Shan I kind of looked at and I was like, I could nerf that. Those are things I could nerf. But when you go through the kind of the rest of the champions, you know, Zillion's fine, Rek'Sai, you know, scene play, fine, Ziggs is fine, you know, Renekton now is a bit better, so that's good. You know, Xerath is pretty good. Aaliyah is pretty good. Nasus is still probably fine. You know, if Shadow Isles was better, Nasus would probably be fine. And then you got Azir, probably like is the one that is kind of maybe a bit below, feels a bit unloved. And I was looking through again. This is one of them where you look through the cards of Shurima and you're like, oh, these are all pretty, you know, pretty decent. Like, you know, I don't want to break something by changing any of them. So what I ended up going was for an Azir Reaver. It was kind of a toss-up between that and the Sivir nerf. But I decided let's revert Azir. Not all the way to 10. I think 11 would be a good number for Azir. Not sure if there's any reason why it like it has to be 10 or 13. Like, you know, seems like they just pick these numbers for balance reasons. So I think 11 would be nice. That kind of in between. Obviously, I don't want to go too far out, but the hope is with the Blade Dance being 2 mana, that, you know, Azir Aurelia could be a deck again. But Azir could also fit in a lot of other things, you know, obviously Sundisk as well. And just, you know, fit within a bunch of things again. Because Azir, I think, was, you know, one of the more successful designs initially. And then kind of, you know, fell out of favor because of all the nerfs. And so I think just bringing him back to 11, you know, just making him an option again. Hopefully not too strong. Like, I am a bit worried if you make it like 10 again, that he would be a bit too strong. So I've just gone with 11, you know, just slightly out there. But I do still think Azir would be good at that point, and hopefully that would enable a lot of things again within Shurima. And last but not least, Targon. And despite Targon, you know, getting quite a few different buffs and, you know, looking more complete as a region, I think there are still, of course, things that could be touched up, that could be made a bit better. And, you know, I mean, there are, you know, Zoe's package obviously is really good. You know, even the Daybreak package now is pretty good. You know, I was playing Malphite a bit earlier and thought it's actually fine. Asol obviously got some help with the whole dragons thing as well. So I am going to look directly, though, at something else, because we did just get a lot of Targon buffs. And I'm kind of a bit wary, you know, of maybe breaking something, and, you know, just in case. So I'm going to go specific here, and I'm going to go with Diana. I'm going to make Diana a 3-2, you know, baseline 3-2. Hopefully that will, you know, help Diana and Nightfall as a whole. I don't think it would be the only change that I could make, but again, I think Targon is kind of in that mid-table tier, so I don't want to push it too far. And I do think that by making Diana a 3-2, it would help, you know, one of the weaker parts potentially of Targon. And we've seen Diana see play, you know, in other, you know, non-Nightfall decks, more Targon Allegiance decks, and maybe this kind of change would help that, you know, become a deck again as well. So I think that would be a nice change as well. And so those are my balance changes, one for each region, to hopefully, you know, try and create a regional balance. So I brought Bandle City down quite a lot. I kind of left Demacia as it is. I brought Noxus down a bit. I, you know, buffed Bilgewater. I buffed Freljord pretty heavily. I kind of changed Ionia a bit, but I think it's a buff overall. I, you know, pretty heavily buffed Heimerdinger, I think. Hopefully he becomes good. I heavily buffed Shadow Owls with the Curse Keeper revert to a 4-3, I think. Azir should become better, and I was hoping that that would, you know, just create a bit more buzz around Shurima, because I don't think Shurima's bad. It just needs something a bit more buzzy, I think. And then the Diana change as well, hopefully to, you know, again, just give Targon something extra. That's kind of what I was hoping to do, and so let me know what you thought of those balance changes, and leave a comment down below, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and with that, I will see you tomorrow with more Legends of Runeterra content. Have a nice day.